Hello? Hello? Yeah, it is good. It's good work. All right. Let's begin. Did you hit the start? Let's start it, man. We are live? Oh, we're live. You're lucky I didn't say something stupid. I didn't even realize we were going live. Okay. Okay, now I want to tell you guys before we begin, thank you for coming. I know we have a bit of a smaller class today because last night we had a big party for the foundation of Yeshiva Temimei as well as the founding of this particular yeshiva in specifically. And so many people are like, well, how do I go to sleep at 2 a.m. and then get up early and learn? And I want to tell you something. I had this question also once upon a time when I was a little younger. Now, at this point in my life, if there's kids at home, I got to get up at a certain time in the morning to get them out of bed and out to school. And it doesn't make a difference what time I went to sleep last night. So I don't know if I want to say I'm jealous of the Bachrim, but sometimes I look at these Bachrim, they're like, oh, if I wake to, I stayed up till 2 o'clock in the morning, and therefore I have to get up. I have to get up late, and I'm like, what? What does that mean? It doesn't work that way. You don't just get up late. Okay, if you have responsibilities, you have things to get to do, and that's it. By the way, even people that have jobs, they can easily just call in and say, I'm sick. They could come up with an excuse if they went to sleep late. But there's one job that you don't get to quit from, and it's called raising kids. You got to get them up in the morning. Yeah. My wife actually today, she woke me up in the morning probably about 7. That's when we usually get up to try to get the kids out to school by 8. And I was not even a daze. I was dreaming while she was like we were like. You ever had that feeling where somebody's talking to you? You kind of know that they're talking to you, but you're still dreaming simultaneously. Like that's what was going on with me this morning, and I'm here, right? And I'm very happy that our dirtball moderators arrived. Are you moderating? Where's your computer? Huh? Why did you wake up late? That's exactly what I'm talking about.
Why'd you wake up late?
I woke up late. Who said I woke up late?
You said you woke up late.
No, I just said I couldn't wake up late. That's the whole point I'm trying to tell you. I had no choice. I couldn't wake up late. Right? That's it. Huh?
Are your kids hard to wake up in the morning?
My kids are extremely hard to get out in the morning, and there's a lot of them, Baruch Hashem. So it's extra hard because I have to get them all out of the bed. Right? You have to come wake them up at least 5 times. Sometimes I have to physically remove them from their bed and put them on the floor, stand them up, and they're like, oh, it's the morning? I'm like, yeah, it's the morning. Yeah, you slept since 9 o'clock last night, and I slept since 2 in the morning, and somehow I'm getting you up. You should be getting me up.
He slept since 9.
No, I'm saying the kids. Yeah. Anyways. Yes. You want to suggest me something? What? Yeah.
You're going to really like it.
Yeah.
It was a TV show that they made about the...
Yeah. TV show about what?
Zalmanov.
Zalmanov? Who's Zalmanov? Yeah. Oh, here.
She's the principal of Bet Hana.
Okay, how many kids she has?
She have, I think, 19.
19 kids. Wow.
And
what a woman.
They went and they start a whole routine.
Yeah.
How they go to sleep, how they get up.
Yeah.
Who's preparing the sandwiches, what kind of sandwiches, the whole thing.
So my house is the same thing. My house is the same thing, it's just not organized. No one knows what they're doing and when they're doing it. That's the difference. Over there, they're organized. They know who does what, when does who, and who did that. That's it.
That's why I recommend that.
You recommend
you
what?
And your wife,
oh, you think you're gonna get me and my wife to be organized? Are you nuts?
I think so. After you see that,
That's gonna happen.
it's amazing.
Yeah, not happening, people.
Every kid
Yeah.
is taking care of the younger.
Let me tell you something. I've been in this situation for a long time. I know how things work. We've tried. We've actually had professionals come into the house and teach us how to be organized. And then a couple of days later, it's like, forget about it. All right? Good. Anyways, how come I can't see the chats? We have to be on the other thing so I could see all the people if they want to comment, if they want to give us some insight, if they want to ask a question. They're definitely whoever's online. You could ask a question. We're about to begin the Talmud of the day. For those of you who just arrived, I want to remind you that today we have a bit of an empty class, at least here in Tzfat, because we had a big party last night for the founding of this very yeshiva, including the founding of the parent yeshiva, which is called Temimei Darech, which was started in somewhere in Eastern Europe. I think it's in Belarus, no? Lubavitch, right? We're part of the Chabad Lubavitch movement, and you know what Lubavitch means? Lubavitch it actually means Loveville. I actually think in America there's actually a city, some towns called Loveville till today. No? Loveville. It's love, the village, like Love Village. So Lubavitch is really Loveville. It's the village of love, right? Because we love everybody, all right? We love them with all our heart and all their soul. God created the people. God created the nation of Israel. We love them all. Baruch Hashem. Kenai Nahara. Anyways, you ready for some Talmud? You think you could handle it after you're quasi-awake, like me? I'm like half-conscious right now. Yeah? What? Chof Zayin Amud Aleph. That means 27A. All right? I want to remind you that we're right now in the middle of a very classical Talmudic hypothesis situation. Okay? Just like as I remember science, we have Talmudic. Tom says there's actually a Loveville in Delaware. In Delaware there's a place called Loveville according to Talmudic Tom, and I don't doubt him because he's been here a while and he's definitely contributed accurate information. So I would assume that's accurate. And as again, Loveville in Loveville in Russian would be Lubavitch. Luba is love, Vich is vil, like village is Vich. Yes, Loveville. There you go. Chabad's about the love. That's it. Anyways, again, we're in a classical Talmudic hypothesis situation where the Talmud basically establishes a particular rule. Once it establishes that rule, it challenges the rule, and then because of the challenge, it needs to tweak the rule because the challenge didn't throw out the entire rule, but it threw out certain aspects of the rule. And by the way, this is exactly how science debunkments, if that's a word. And once you do that, then you basically have a new hypothesis, which then is challenged on its own, meaning the new hypothesis is then challenged. You understand? Good. Now that's exactly what's going on here. And that's why I want to go step by step in the original hypothesis. All right? The original hypothesis is that the very fact that in the Holy Temple they blew trumpets together with the shofar, and the only thing that you heard shofar independently was that the shofar would blow a little longer than the trumpets. Okay? Now, we originally assumed that a human being is not capable of hearing two simultaneous sounds. They're not capable. It doesn't work. Okay? And therefore, we're building an hypothesis based on the fact you cannot hear two simultaneous sounds. Since you cannot hear two simultaneous sounds, and you are in fact hearing a trumpet together with the shofar. However, the shofar is extending. Therefore, that seems to prove that if you hear part of a blow, then it is good enough. You don't need to hear the entire blow from beginning to the end. You only have to hear part of it. And the Gemara then says, well, if you're only hearing part of it, well, it shouldn't make a difference whether you're hearing the first part or whether you're hearing the second part. It shouldn't make a difference. Okay? So the hypothesis is over here. Number one is that human beings are incapable of hearing two sounds simultaneously. That's number one. Number two is that proves that you are fulfilling your obligation of hearing the shofar blowing. If you only hear part of the blow, you don't have to hear the entire blow from the beginning to the end. All right? Now, I want to go through the steps, even though we are repeating a little bit of what we learned yesterday, but I think it's vital to understand the flow of this hypothesis, etc. I've said this in the past. I hope I'm not too repetitive for our viewers here in class, but I've said this in the past a lot, that people have approached me and asked me if I think that the Talmud was based on the scientific method, and I've told them absolutely, unequivocally no. The Talmudic brilliance was not based on the scientific method. The scientific method was based on the Talmud, because the Talmud came before the scientific method, and you see a lot of the scientific method in the Talmud, but it's not that we learned the method from them, it's they learned the method from us. The Talmud predates the scientific method, and the people who created the scientific method, seemingly they actually learned the Talmud, and they were using the logic, the style of logic built in the Talmud to affect or to perfect the scientific method. All right?
By the way,
Yes.
the story with Apollo, first of
With who? Apollo.
all,
Apollo, you mean like the spaceships? Yeah?
that they sent to the moon.
Yeah.
So the scientific community
Yeah.
calculated it,
Yeah.
and then they asked from Jewish scholar to tell them what's the distance to
To the moon.
Torah opinion.
Yeah.
In the end, the Torah opinion was exactly correct
Yeah.
versus the scientific.
So it was better, it was more correct than the scientific method. You know why? Because the Torah has been doing science before they. That's it. We were doing it first. Right? Yeah. Ubara Alma, exactly. Anyways, so let's go through the steps of the hypothesis without getting too debunked and diffused and derailed on other things, okay? Good. All right. So as I said, the original hypothesis, 2 steps. Step number 1 is that you cannot hear 2 things at once. Step number 2 is that therefore you should be fulfilling your obligation by hearing part of a sound of a shofar, not necessarily the whole thing. All right? Now, we brought a brisa which seems to contradict that, because it says if you blow one long shofar, you cannot be yotza 2 sounds, right? There's certain times where you have 2 tekiyas, one after the next. If you blow one long tekiya, which one long sound, it does not help you. I'm sorry, it does not help you. You're not fulfilling the obligation. It's only 1. Now, if it's only counted as 1, seemingly, if you have a really long one, why can't you count the first half as hearing the first half of a horn, and the second half as the second half of the horn? The very fact that we say you're not fulfilling your obligation seems to indicate that that rule, that hypothesis, is incorrect. Now, with this particular tashma, we actually throw out the critique completely, because we say no. When are you fulfilling your obligation when you only heard part of a shofar sound? That is only when you heard part of a sound. But you cannot take one sound and split it down the middle. If you hear one sound, then it's one sound. You can't take one sound and say, oh, I'm really hearing 2 sounds. I'm hearing the beginning of one and the end of the other. No, because it's really one sound. Now, if you really heard half a sound, perhaps, again, this is not a proof that the hypothesis is true, but it is a proof that the critique is invalid. You understand? I've actually had a very interesting discussion online on Facebook. For those of you who will follow me on Facebook, I had a very interesting discussion with somebody who was trying to argue for atheism, and I was basically telling them that atheism is a religion. So the person said, "Well, if you're trying to prove that there's God, then you have the onus of what is it? The onus? You have the burden of proof." So I explained to him, yes, but there's 2 arguments out there. There's 2 arguments. They're 2 separate arguments. There's one argument to say that there is a God. There's another argument to say that there's not a God, and they're both independent of each other. They're completely different arguments. If I want to prove God, okay, I need to prove that God exists. If you want to suggest that God doesn't exist, then you need to argue why he doesn't exist. Now, if you're going to tell me that there's no evidence either way, or I would say, if you're going to tell me that that you were never given compelling evidence either way, now that's fear, right? That's fear. As a matter of fact, I once met an atheist on the street, and we were having a discussion, and he told me he's atheist, and we started asking questions about God, and I told him, listen, we have a very big problem here, because me and you cannot have a conversation because one of us are religious and the other one isn't. Now, he assumed that when I said one of us is not religious, he was assuming I was talking about him, right? So I looked him straight in the eye, and I said, you're religious and I'm not. And he says, what do you mean you're not religious? I'm not. I'm atheist. No, you're religious, right? If you are an atheist, you're religious. And by the way, people have argued with me, the true definition of atheism, if you look it up in dictionaries, the true definition of atheism is a person that believes that there is no God. Now, if you're going to believe that there is no God, that's just as blind faith as to jump and say that there is a God. What's the difference? Right? You have proof that there is a God. Do you have the proof that there isn't a God? No. Now, if a person tells me they're agnostic, right? Now that I could say, okay, maybe you can be a rational agnostic. You can be rational and say, listen, I haven't yet seen. Agnostic means that you're not sure. That's what agnostic means. You're not sure whether there is a God. Now that's fear. I mean, if you weren't given evidence that there's a God, so then why should you believe that there's a God, right? Now, I disagree with the notion that there is no proof that there's a God. I think there is proof that there's a God, especially according to the proper definitions of what God really is. You want to get into that? We're in the Talmud class, right? The proof, you want the proof in what? And when you stand on one foot. So I'll give you the proof when you stand on one foot, but you need to figure it out. The proof that there's a God is you. That's the proof. The very fact that you exist proves that there's a God. Because you yourself know that you are an everlasting being that never started and never end. And I could show you, it's not simple, but I could sit here for about half an hour and show you how you already know that you are an eternal being. You know this. You don't think this. You don't believe this, but you know this from internal realities that you've already experienced that prove to you that you're an eternal being. Now, if you're an eternal being, means you are always here, which means what? What does that mean?
Different from your body.
It means that you're different from your body, correct. It means that you and your body are two independent realities, which is true. But it also means that there is a reality that's far beyond your body. And you know this because you are this. You are the reality. As a matter of fact, one of the reasons people have so much difficulty accepting godliness is because the God is the one looking out. Right? You're looking out and seeing everything. You're like, where's God? And you're like, hello, turn the lens around and start looking inside. If you look inside yourself, you will realize that there's a God inside of you. Right? The bigger question is not if they're not the bigger question is what exactly this world is. Right? Whether there's a God, that's obvious. Whether this world actually exists, that's something that needs to be discussed. Maybe it does, maybe it doesn't. Right? It could be a figment of our imagination. And it's very possible. There's no way to prove that we're not in some virtual reality movie like The Matrix. There's no way to prove that we're not in The Matrix, right? To prove that we are, we know we are because we're experienced we are. Who are we? We are this eternal being that happens to be currently in a formation called a body. That's what we are right now, right? What is the body? Does it really exist? Does it not really exist, right? Who made it? Why was it made? These are all questions that need to be figured out. And they're legitimate questions, right? But the essential concept of knowing God is knowing yourself. The very fact that you exist proves that there's a God, right? Because you are an eternal being. You might even say that I would suggest that you are the God, but you're not the God because you're limited. At least your current perspective is not God. And by the way, in Kabbalah, at the core, you are God. At the core, you are God experiencing a worldly reality, which you yourself created, and I mean not the you as your body, but the you as the God within your body created this reality that you're now experiencing for a particular purpose, right? And if if you think about this, and I don't want to get too much into it because it's on a completely different topic than what we're learning, but the more you get into this, the more you'll realize how accurately provable this is. As a matter of fact, it's more provable than the actual reality you live in. It's actually more obvious that God exists than to say the body exists. It's more obvious to the human mind to say that God exists than to say that the human body exists. Now, what happens is that a lot of religions, they paint God as some external being, some outside being. Now, I know that I exist, right? You're going to tell me that God exists? Prove it to me, right? Now, that's if you look at God as this external being. If you're looking at God as a purely a being completely outside of yourself, that can't be provable, right? How can you prove that something outside of me exists? Through my even if I'm gonna prove to you that it exists from a worldly perspective, well, who says that perspective is real? It can't be proven, right? If I tell you that I exist, could I prove to you that I exist? Could I prove to you that I exist? No, I can't. I'm standing here in front of your face. You see me. I cannot prove to you that I exist. I can't do it. Because I could be a figment of your imagination, and I could really not exist. And there's no way for anybody to prove you otherwise. It's impossible. No one can prove to you that I'm not just a figment of your imagination and that you're not living right now in a matrix type of reality. No one can prove that. Right? That's it. I just want to say hi to our frequent student over here, Louise, Talmudic Tam, and we even have a Namu, I can't even say that, Namu Linda from Uganda. Oh wow, we're an international class here, thank God. All right. Anyways, those are the people that oh, you have a light. Wow, look at this, we're getting fancy. We have what was I say? What? What's that? Remember, if you want to participate in this class, you want to ask a question, all you have to do is put it into the comments, and that's the way it is. By the way, is this even working? This light in my face, man. It's like, does it make it better? Let's ask the people out there. Do you see me better ever since this guy shined this light in my face?
Turn it off for a second. Let's see the difference.
For sure it's better, bro.
So turn it off. Let's see.
It doesn't even make a difference, Rabbi.
No, that does. So, no, but not at the bright. A little higher, but I think that's good. No, that's too bright. Too bright. That's it. Enough.
Next level.
Wow, we're getting fancy here. He's putting up lights.
Next level.
Anyways, I don't know how we got into this whole conversation with God and all this stuff, but we did it. Let's continue. Yes. You went to Kiryat Gat? Good. What did you got? Anyways. All right. So again, we started with the hypothesis. To suggest that you cannot hear part of a sound. We threw out that hypothesis. Sorry. We did not. We tried to challenge that you cannot hear the beginning and not the end. And then we threw out that critique. So that critique was gone, and now we're starting again. We're trying to see if we can disprove it. And that's where we're up to today. Today we're going to start as follows. Toshma, come and listen. We spoke about the keyword Toshma yesterday, and I'm not going to repeat it today. All right? Toshma means come and listen. We're going to bring a quote which will try to challenge our current hypothesis. And we say, if somebody blows a shofar into a pit, into a deuce is kind of Rashi explains it's like a pit but over ground. I don't know what that means, but it means like maybe like you built something over ground, or if you blow an above ground, above. Like we have over here, we have all over the streets over here, we have these bomb shelters. Maybe that's a dus. Yeah, we have a dus. By the way, it's crazy here. If you come to Israel today, you come to Tzfat, every few blocks there's these little bomb shelters so that if there's a bomb coming, you run in. They're like these public bomb shelters. You know, you can have, in some places they have public toilets. In Israel, we have public bomb shelters. It's not a joke. We have them here. And if you come, I could show them to you. Maybe if I decide to take this YouTube thing a little bit more seriously, maybe I'll walk around with a camera and I'll show you guys. Anybody want to sponsor a good camera? If you're going to sponsor a camera, I'll take some videos. It's expensive. Anyways. Yes. So if you blow a shofar into the pit, or into this dus, or into a pitam, which is like a barrel, it says, Im kol shofar shama, if you heard the sound of the shofar, yatsa, you fulfilled your obligation. The im kol havara shama, however, if you heard the sound of the echo, you are not fulfilling your obligation, which means you cannot blow a shofar into, you cannot fulfill your obligation of hearing Rosh Hashanah shofar if it's coming from an echo. You have to hear it directly, not bouncing off of something else. Now, this is the statement of the Brisa. Using this statement, the Gemara is going to try to analyze how this is a challenge to our hypothesis. So now we're first going to analyze this statement, and based on the analysis, we are going to try to challenge the hypothesis that we said till now. So what is it? Yeah. Amai. Why would he not be Yotze hearing the shofar if he heard it from the echo? Leipuk b'tchilas tekiyo mikamed li arev kolo. Let him be Yotze from hearing the beginning of the blowing before the mixing of its echo. When you start blowing, when you're in a really echoey place, the first sound that you let out is actually the actual sound, and then a second or a split second later, it starts connecting with the echo. And if you're in a really, really echoey place, if you're a chazan, you know how to kind of sing together with your echo, which means you sing somewhat slowly. That as the echo builds up, you kind of like you're actually hearing the same tone like 5 times over, because you're hearing it once from the person's mouth and 4 times from the echo, right? We actually have in Tzfat, you can come here if you want to visit, there's a place we call it the singing cave. The singing cave is this old Byzantine structure that is super, super echoey. You literally have to go through, they had to carve a hole in the mountain, because the way to get into it, I don't know, they apparently the entrance into it, they carved this hole through a mountain to get into this big hollow area. And when you're in that hollow area, it's super echoey. Literally, if you start singing, you'll hear your voice times like 10. Literally, they call it the singing cave. The sound cave? They called it the singing, no? Singing cave, no? Sound cave. You'd call it the sound cave. Some people call it the sound cave, some people call it the singing cave, but if you go there, it's an awesome experience to sing in that cave. You go into this cave, and it's an awesome, let me ask you something, Shimon. How long you lived here? You lived here 30 years and you never went to the sound cave? That sounds like a New Yorker that never went to Statue of Liberty, right? A New Yorker's like, Statue of Liberty. This is one of the main places. All the people that come visit Tzfat, all the young kids, they go there, they sing. You go there any Saturday night, you're going to see it's going to be packed with a bunch of young kids singing and screaming and all that stuff. Yeah, it's mamish a happening place. That's where your kids were hanging out when they ran away from home and you're not sure where they went. That's where they went, right? you gotta hope. You gotta hope there's no cannabis going on over there either. All right. She takes her students to smoke cannabis. No? Anyways. Good. Anyways, we have literally an international crowd here waiting for us over here. We have somebody all the way from Hawaii, right? Hawaii, right? Anyways. Listen, so over here, the Gemara says, if you could fulfill your obligation by hearing part of the sound. Now, why would echo be a problem? Because anytime you hear an echo, you first hear the original. Yes, but you first hear the original sound, and then you hear the echo. What comes first, the original sound or the echo? Exactly. So even though a second into the blow, you start hearing the echo mixed with the original sound, and therefore you have a problem. But before, you heard part of the tekiah. And the hypothesis is that if you hear part of a tekiah, you fulfilled your obligation. Now, if you hear part of the tekiah is fulfilling your obligation, you heard part of the tekiah before it got mixed with the echo. You understand? So that seems to be a challenge to this hypothesis, right? Again, the hypothesis is that if you hear part of the sound of the shofar, you are fulfilling your obligation. This seems to reject it. Now the Gemara is going to reject the complete rejection of this hypothesis by saying as follows. Yeah. So now, instead of rejecting the critique, it's very important to realize what's going on. Yeah. You have to realize that in the past we had to challenge the hypothesis, and we rejected the challenge to the hypothesis. Okay, in this particular case, we're doing something unique. We are not debunking the challenge completely. We're actually reorganizing the hypothesis. Okay, and it's important because when you hear the Gemara reorganizing the hypothesis, you have to realize that the Gemara is concluding that the hypothesis is limited to whatever we're about to limit, and then going forward, you're going to have to try to realize that the Gemara is assuming that the rule is changed. So right now we're changing the hypothesis. We're not rejecting the hypothesis. We're not rejecting the critique to the hypothesis either. We're just reorganizing the hypothesis in order to bypass the critique of the hypothesis. You understand? And how we're doing that? So the Gemara basically says that if you're going to hear two voices, two sounds, coming from one person, meaning the same person is making two sounds, we can't hear the two sounds. But if two separate people are making two separate sounds, then we could hear it. That's what the Gemara says. What's that?
Like right and left side.
Like somebody said yesterday, what we have today, we have all these, what's it called? We have orchestras and there's many instruments coming together, and you do hear all the sounds, right? As a matter of fact, the beauty of an orchestra is how all these sounds come together in a special way.
It's a new sound though.
What's that? Not necessarily. No, it is it's not a new sound. It's a compilation of many individual sounds.
Which makes a new sound.
But no, it is independent sounds of each other. That's what the Gemara seems to be suggesting. Is that when you have two separate people making two separate sounds, you could hear both of them completely. But if one person is making two sounds, then it's going to be confusing, right? Because the same person is making two sounds, says you cannot. If two separate people are making two separate sounds. No, we're talking about the shofar.
The shofar, exactly, talking about the color shofar.
So therefore, if one person is blowing the shofar into the barrel, you cannot hear when there's this bouncing around, right? Meaning that you cannot hear the two sounds that the one person is making. However, if two separate people are making the sounds, then you in fact could hear it.
And two separate people in a barrel?
No, what are we talking about? We're talking about in the temple where you had the sound of the horn and you had the sound of the shofar. But the sound of the horn was being blown by one person and the sound of the shofar was being blown by another person. And since there was independent people making these sounds, therefore you could hear both of them simultaneously. Okay. All right? For those of you who don't know English, that means all together at one time. All right? Yes, thank you. By the way, I want to thank you guys for commenting, for participating in this class. We're just beginning. If you have a question that's on the topic of the class, you put it in the comments and we'll entertain it if we feel it's relevant. If you want to ask any other question, you have to wait till the end of the class. In the end of the class, you could ask any question, whether it's relevant or not. We have people mentioning they're from England, from Hawaii. We have everywhere. Anyways. Okay, so Mr. Mashal Khan, you have to ask your question again at the end of the class. It's not necessarily relevant to the class. Here he says, your take on Feast of Trumpets, Yom Teruah. Well, that's actually what we're talking about, which is Rosh Hashanah. The Feast of Trumpets, it's actually coming out on the Jewish calendar in about 2 weeks. And that's exactly what we're talking about, is how that worked in the Holy Temple in Jerusalem. And so you came to the right place for the discussion. Thank you. You even knew about it. You maybe called it something else, But yeah, we call it Rosh Hashanah, which is the head, the beginning of the year, and how the Feast of Trumpets, which is really what the Torah calls it. The Bible actually calls it what? Yom Teruah. It's actually the day. The truth is, it's not really the day of trumpets. It's actually the day of blowing, right? Teruah is like blowing, but like blowing a horn. And we don't blow trumpets. We blow a ram's horn. That's because it actually says a shofar is actually a ram's horn, or actually any animal's horn that's naturally hollow could be used for this, as we learned in the past. All right? There you go. Anyways, let's continue. Now, you have to realize how you just reorganize this hypothesis. In the past, the hypothesis was that you could hear part of a sound and not the other, right? Here, it seems like we threw out that whole hypothesis. No, you cannot hear two sounds at once. You can't hear two sounds at once. You can't hear part of a sound. Sorry, the hypothesis was you cannot hear. The hypothesis was that if you hear part of a sound, you're yotze. You're fulfilled your obligation, right? We just concluded, no, you cannot hear part of a sound and be yotze. You have to hear the sound from beginning to the end. However, why in that case did they blow trumpets together with the shofar in the holy temple? The reason for that is because two separate people are blowing, therefore you could in fact hear the sound of two separate people simultaneously, right? That is the new hypothesis. Again, the original problem is that we have people in the temple blowing metal horns and the shofar. According to the Torah, you must hear the shofar, which means you have to hear the natural horn. You have to hear the ram's horn, the natural ram's horn. That's what you have to hear, right? Now, if you have the horns blowing at the same time of the shofar, seemingly that messes around with it. Originally, we thought, yeah, but because the shofar extends a little longer, therefore that extra extension is what fulfills your obligation. But if that was true, then you'd have to deal with the hypothesis saying that you could hear. No, you would have to deal with the hypothesis saying that you could hear part of the sound and not the whole sound. But the story with the echo threw out that hypothesis, and therefore we made a new hypothesis that if two separate people are blowing, you can pay attention to what one of them are blowing, even if the other one's blowing.
So you want to meet the extension according to that.
So therefore, you don't even need, correct. So therefore, you don't even need the extension to fulfill your obligation, right? And it's for something else, and the Gemara is going to discuss why they extended it. However, you would be yotze listening to the shofar together with this horn that was blowing in the holy temple. All right? Good. Where are we? Okay, so that's where we're holding right now. We're holding now is that you could hear the sound you could hear two sounds from two people, but you cannot hear two sounds from one person. Doesn't work. Yeah? Yeah? Now the Gemara, you had a question on the topic? Yes? Yeah?
Maybe we'll just backtrack.
Does he have a microphone, by the way? Do we have we don't have a second microphone?
Rabbi Goldstein has my other microphone.
He walked off with your microphone?
You can pass it to him.
Here, pass it to him if you can ask a question.
Me?
They're just speaking to it.
When we mention if you hear the beginning of the tkiya or the end of the tkiya, did he fill up the obligation or not?
Right now we threw that out.
No,
Again, the hypothesis, according to the original hypothesis, you could only hear part. But we threw that out based on the proof of blowing into the barrel or to the pit. We threw that out because otherwise you would be yotze because you heard the beginning before the echo kicked in. And therefore we threw out that hypothesis and we replaced it with a new hypothesis. The new hypothesis is that if you're hearing shofar if you hear two sounds from the same person, you cannot separate the two sounds. But if you're hearing two sounds from two different people, you could. And therefore, when they're blowing the horn together with the shofar, because different people, one guy's blowing the horn and one guy's blowing the shofar, therefore you're hearing the shofar from the beginning. You're not hearing the shofar from the end. You're hearing the shofar for the whole time.
Okay, and how about in the middle, between the beginning and the end?
Again, according to the new hypothesis, you must hear the shofar from beginning to the end. Meaning you cannot hear part. You cannot hear part. You can only hear from the beginning.
But
You have to hear the entire sound from the beginning till the end. Yeah. Yeah.
That used to be is Kia, Tua, Kia. So if the
Yeah.
if you
First of
hear
all, we're
the
talking
first
with
Kia, you hear
yeah.
the end of the Kia. How about the middle part of the Tua?
So again, you're separating the different sounds. I'm talking about one sound. Each sound is independent. I mean, a tekiah is a tekiah, trua is trua. Each sound is independent. That's what we're saying. Right now, we're saying that in each sound you have to hear from the beginning to the end. Right? So if there's a tekiah, you have to hear the beginning of the tekiah all the way till the end of the tekiah. Tekiah, if you know the shofar blowing, there's a few different sounds that are made from the shofar. There's a long one, and then there's a small break one, and then there's a very quick one. There's do there's do, and then there's do, and then there's do. Right? So there's different sounds. Now each sound is independent of the other. Okay? What we're saying here is that in each sound, you have to hear the sound from the beginning till the end, right? You cannot hear part of a sound. You have to hear the entire sound. Otherwise, you didn't fulfill the obligation. But according to the new hypothesis, even though people were blowing horns next to the shofar, but because they were two separate people, you in fact heard from the beginning to the end of the shofar, right? And there was no break in the middle because you could hear two sounds from two people, okay? That is the new hypothesis. Now the Gemara is going to challenge that hypothesis as well. And from two people, you could in fact hear two sounds. So the Gemara challenges that with another brisa. The Hot Tanya, it says in a brisa, when you're reading the Torah, the Pentateuch, by the way, when we're talking about the Torah in this terminology, we're talking about what the Christians call the Pentateuch, which are the 5 books of Moses, the Chamisha Chumshei Torah. When you're reading from the official reading, if you know, I'm not sure if you've seen this, but if you come to a synagogue, we read it from a handwritten scroll that was made the same way, as far as we know. These are the scrolls made the same way all the way from the time of Moses. It holds a very special respect, and there's rules of how you read it and how you're not allowed to read it, right? And says,
Penta is 5, right?
correct. The Pentateuch is the 5 books of Moses, right? So when we read in the official congregation from the original written text, right? When we're reading from the Pentateuch, it says over there in the Brisa, you could have one person read and one person translate. I want to tell you that most of you guys are looking at, what are you talking about? Today in the Jewish world, we just read the entire Hebrew text, and we just read from beginning to end. There was actually a time where
the Ammonites still until today,
yeah,
they're reading the Torah and they're reading
the Targum to get in the synagogue. I never seen that, but again, it's recorded in the Talmud, and it's actually was a common, well-accepted tradition amongst the Jewish people, is that you would read one verse and then somebody would translate it into Aramaic. Then they used to do it into Aramaic. In the Yemenite community, they probably still do it into Aramaic, which is not really the point. The point really is that you translate it into a language so that people understand it. So that if people don't understand the ancient Hebrew language, at least they could understand what's going on, right? So we said that one person could read the Hebrew and another person could read the translation. However, he says, you cannot have two people reading together and two people translating together, right? So meaning that when you're reading the Torah, we say, no, it's a problem for two people to read the Torah simultaneously. What does that sound like? That sounds like you cannot hear the sound, the voice of two people simultaneously, which disproves our hypothesis, right? Our hypothesis is that you could hear two sounds from two people simultaneously, right? So the Gemara basically says as follows. Holy damya el l'seifa. The Gemara says this is not compared. Don't compare this hypothesis to the beginning of the Braisatic quote. You need to compare it to the end, because the very same brisa continues, and it says, "B'halal u'b'megillah afilu asarim koden." It says when you're dealing with reading the Hallel, the praising of God, or when you're reading the Megillah, the book of Esther, he says you could have numerous people saying it at the same time simultaneously. So yes, the Torah you're not allowed to have two people, but everything else you could. Now the very fact that we're saying that everything else you could, what does that show? That shows you could hear two people simultaneously. Why can't you read the Torah like that? Perhaps that had to do with respect. Perhaps out of respect, it's not respectable that you have 10 people reading the Torah simultaneously. So out of respect, we have one person reading out loud and one person translating and not more. However, regards to things that don't require as much respect as reading the Torah, of course they do require respect, but not as much respect as reading the Torah, right? Those things you can have two people saying it simultaneously and it's no contradiction, no issue. You're allowed to do it, not a problem. All right? Good. So that's what the Gemara says, and that's that. And the Gemara concludes by saying, Al Makivan de Chaviv. He says, since if you're in a situation where you're reading something that you really are appreciating, you're passionate about, Yohiv Daite, you're going to pay attention properly. Hachanami here too, regarding the situation of listening to the shofar, you're going to be so excited about hearing the shofar that you are going to pay attention to hear the shofar. Now the Gemara comes back to our original question. If that's the case, why do we have to blow the shofar a little longer than the horns? So the Gemara says, "Ela lama marich b'shofar." Why are we extending the sound of the shofar? Why are we making the shofar sound louder? So the Gemara says, "Leida shemitzvos hayom b'shofar." The Gemara says it's simply symbolic. It's a symbolic to show that the mitzvah, the commandment of the Torah, has to do with blowing the shofar, because if they blew the exact same amount of time, you would think that the commandment has to do with blowing the metal horns and maybe also the shofar. Here we want to emphasize the fact that the mitzvah, the commandment from God, is to blow the animal horn and not the metal horn. You understand? And because of this, they used to blow the shofar a little longer. It's completely symbolic to show you that the main mitzvah is to hear the shofar and not the other horns. Because the chatzot rates were also, the horns that in the temple, we were required also to blow these horns. I guess it is a mitzvah, but it's not the mitzvah of the day. Every day they used to blow horns in the temple, right? Yeah, if you actually look biblically in the temple service, it's fascinating just to imagine what actually happened in the Holy Temple of Jerusalem. It's fascinating, right? There's books that write about it, right? There's books that write about it. You have, by the way, what's his name? Josephus. Josephus writes a lot about his experiences in the Holy Temple, and I'm not necessarily suggesting you should read Josephus, but again, he records it. There's other records, Jewish records about what happened in the temple, and it was awesome. The experience of being in the temple was unimaginable, right? And you could try to imagine it, and if you did, you would see it's awesome. But what's that?
They start to make 3D animations.
Yes, there are right. There are some 3D animations of the temple services today, and yes, they do exist. As a matter of fact, they have the ones you could put the goggles on, and you're going like this, and it literally feels like you're in the temple. I've done it. Yes, I've done it. Yeah. It's actually pretty cool. VR? I don't know how they did it. I'm not a computer programmer, but they did it. It works.
The Oculus beta make
Huh? Yes, it's awesome. Anyways, so that is actually the end of the third temple. Is going to be more awesome. Bezrat Hashem. Yeah.
It's going to be made of all the shuls around the world.
There's a lot of different opinions and suggestions and predictions of what's going to happen by the third temple. I'm not going to get into it because we'll yeah. Anyways, I want to first say that we've finished the quota for this week, by the way, even though usually we try to finish it on Wednesday. This is the end of the quota for the Talmud of the week. All right, tomorrow we're going to do a bit of a review. We're going to go over briefly, just to kind of like give you a general perspective of it. And then we will be testing the guys here. The guys online, I guess I can't test them. You're not in my class. I can't do anything about that. But you can definitely join. We should be here. Generally, we're here every day from 11 to 12, Israel time. Now, I want to mention before you guys leave that once we finish the official class, That's when we open up to questions where you could ask questions on topic or off topic. And if I feel that I could answer it, if God gives me the inspiration, I say, wow, you know what, I actually have an answer to your question. I will attempt to answer that question. As a matter of fact, in this particular class, we got into some of the most exciting and sometimes controversial discussions all around the comments that came up over here, the comments, the questions. If you want to post a comment or ask a question, you simply have to put it in the comment section wherever you are, Facebook, YouTube, and we will attempt to deal with it. I know some people on my Facebook have been asking me, Rabbi, why don't you ever tell us what you think? I say, come to my class, this is the place. You want to hear what I think? Or ask me a question. On my Facebook, I ask you a question. For whoever knows on Facebook, I ask the questions on Facebook. But if you want to ask me a question, that's where you come to my class. You can ask me a question live if you're here during the live stream. All right, let's go. We have somebody here. Did the priest use two types of yovel? So first of all, the word yovel is actually another word for a shofar. Okay, the priests would use, as we learned, the priests would use a shofar, which was a ram's horn. They also used a horn simultaneously. A metal horn. It was a metal horn. It was man-made metal horn. And then usually on Rosh Hashanah we say there was two horns on either side and the shofar was in the center. There were other times where it was the opposite, where you had two shofars on either side and then the horn in the center. Right?
Wait, they had 3 horns?
What's that?
They had 3 horns?
Who had 3 horns? No, they used it simultaneously. In the temple, they used to blow 2 metal horns and the shofar all at the same time. That's exactly what we were just discussing in the Gemara. How could you fulfill your obligation when you're listening to multiple sounds simultaneously? That was a whole discussion here. But that's the answer to your question. Anyone else who wants to put up a question? There were, I think, a few questions that came up a little earlier. If you want to go up there, unless somebody else a new question, then we'll go there. All right, we have hello, sir. How is real satanic member, Illuminati or organization member?
There we go, that Illuminati.
That's what I was waiting for.
Because of the lights, you got illuminated, so it seems you're Illuminati.
Okay, first of all, if you want to ask a question, you need to learn to speak English properly. And if you use proper grammar, maybe your question could be answered. Learn English.
Anyways, so what do the Illuminati think? Should we share the secrets online?
They suspect you for something very interesting.
Huh?
Suspecting you for something
They're suspecting me for being the Illuminati. I wish I was. If you look at the Illuminati, they were very wealthy. They were very They're very powerful, right? Let me ask you something. If I was the Illuminati, do you think I would be spending time with the 10 people that are here I have online? What do you think?
You'll be flying around.
Right? Yeah, I'd be flying around in a private jet, sipping, yeah, exactly.
Sipping children's blood.
Yes. All right. Anyone else? Anybody want to throw in a question, a comment, something that you want us to deal with? Do we have anybody else up there? We actually had quite a few people from different places here. We had a very international place. No, we dealt with that question already in class. Anyone else? Did the priest? Yeah, we spoke about that already as well. Yes, we did that. All right. If anybody in class has a question you want to ask? No? If you want to ask any questions, up to you. We'll give you about another 20 seconds to put up a question. If you put up a question, we will try to deal with it. What does it say?
What would Josiah do to the lodges in Israel?
So first of all, who's Josiah?
I don't know.
Who's that?
Lodges is a Freemason. It's like a shul for Freemasons.
Yeah, it's called a lodge. I could lodge a complaint. Lodge a complaint. First of all, I don't know who Josiah is. At least maybe in Hebrew it's pronounced differently. It's I don't know what that is.
Oh,
Yeshayahu? No, that would be Isaiah. No, that would be Isaiah. Who's Yeshaya? Maybe he is talking about Isaiah. Yeah. Yeah. Oh, so he said, did the priest use the straight aurochs horn. We actually spoke about that in a previous class, and there's actually times where they did use the irex, is it called?
Ibex?
Irex. It says irex. The straight irex horn, they did use it sometimes. There's actually a dispute when they used it, but according to every opinion, they did use it sometimes. It depends on which occasion. It represented different things. There were certain things that the ram's horn represented certain things, and Anyways, I'm going to tell you, Mr. Madison Shadwell, okay, that's speaking about the lodges, etc. Now, a lot of people like assuming that there's somebody horribly evil out there, constantly, scheming to kill and to murder and to maim and to just do the Satan's job. Okay. Now that's kind of what conspiracy theories is about. It's basically people with an unfortunate phobia, and they have inner fear, and they have so much inner fear that they need something to connect it with. Because if they say I'm afraid of nothing, they'll sound like an idiot. So they make up some story, and then they become afraid of it, or they hear somebody else's story and they become afraid of it. Okay, not necessarily are these issues. Somebody came to me yesterday. They heard a guy's in the Freemasons. Maybe he's not Jewish. Who says? There's a lot of Freemasons. There are a lot of people in the Freemason movement that are Jewish. There are a lot of people that are Christian, right? It could, again, it's almost like, if you think that the Freemasons are that bad, why don't you join it for, at least for some time? Just check it out, see what it is, and if it's that bad, then leave, right? What's the big deal, right? I don't like locking in on, this guy's all horrible. Could be they're good people. Who says? Who says there's anything wrong with it? I don't know. Is there anything wrong with Freemasonry? Huh? Again, if you ask me, somebody that's dangerous, Hezbollah is dangerous. They're killing people, right? Hamas is dangerous. ISIS is dangerous. These are people that you actually are actively hurting people, right? I don't need to look for I don't like looking for some demon hiding in a closet, and I don't know where he is and who he is and how he is, and I'm now going to be afraid of him, and now I'm going to see that he's evil because I don't know anything about him. Like, I don't buy that. Right? I think that the evil people, the people that are truly evil, actually are, you can prove it. You don't need to, make a theory about it.
I'll come and tell you exactly what they're into.
Yeah. Good.
Topic.
Somebody asked a good question. They said, is a horn symbolic for strength? That's a great question, and the truth is, it depends. It depends on which horn. The irex or the ram. The ram's horn is actually meant to be a symbol of humility. As we said, it's bent. It's very bent. It symbolizes a person that's bent over, which is a humble person. Whereas the irex horn is a straight. It's a symbol of pride. It's a symbol of uprightness. It's a symbol of excitement or happiness and joy. And that's why according to some opinions, we blow the irex horn by Yovel because people are going free, people are happy, people are joyous, and therefore we blow the irex horn. Whereas during Rosh Hashanah, where you're meant to be correcting your sins, you use the ram's horn, which is bent, which is a symbol of humility. So the simple answer to Thaddeus Malachor, did I say it good? Did I say it good? Huh? That is Malachor. So the answer to your question again is that it depends on which horn. Some of the horns could I don't know about strength, but about pride. Some of the horns present pride, and some of it pride, freedom, etc. Some of the horns actually represent the exact opposite, which is humility in front of God. All right? Anyone else? Remember, you could ask your questions right here. We're looking for your questions. If we don't, we'll close it down. How's our time doing? It's not so late. We can go for another 3-4 minutes if people ask questions. If not, we can shut it down now.
Like and subscribe.
Yeah. Again, I didn't say that. My friend over here says that if you did not yet like and subscribe, what on earth are you waiting for? Why are you waiting so long? Just do it already, right? Be part of our program. What happened here? Well, hold on a second. Do you consider Israel a kingdom? What do you think? That's a good question. Is Israel a kingdom?
What do you mean when Israel first of all?
What's that? Do you do that? What's that?
Like and subscribe.
Oh, like and subscribe. Okay, good.
What is Israel? What is a kingdom?
So first of all, I don't know really what a kingdom is. If your kingdom, do you have a king? A king? I mean, we should, according to the Torah, we should have a king, right? As a matter of fact, the Jewish people look forward to the Messianic era. We actually call it King Messiah, because King Messiah is meant to be a king that leads the nation of Israel to its true and ultimate destiny here in Israel, building the temple, etc. That is what King Messiah is about. Now, the current state of Israel is definitely not a kingdom as a kingdom. It's a government. It's a state. It's actually a modern democratic secular state. People don't realize this. Again, if you ask me, it's a secular state that kind of capitalized on a deep religious connection, right? So again, no, I'm serious. Like it's a secular state, and it was actually started by secular people, but they realized that in order for them to actually attract enough people to make their state successful, they wouldn't be able to do it just by being a secular state. So therefore, they came to Israel, they came to the ancient land of the Jewish people, and they said, oh, it's going to be a Jewish state, and now all the Jews come here, etc. But I can tell you, if you ask me, in some ways, Jews have more freedom of religion in America than they do have in Israel, right? Because of the secular state, they in education and a lot of other things. There's a lot of how should I say it? There's a lot of anti-religious what do you call it? The government policies that and that's actually why, by the way, there's a lot of religious political parties, because it's almost like a self-defense mechanism, right? A lot of the secular people complain about the growth of the religious parties, but they don't realize it's actually their fault. It's the fault of the seculars that the religious parties are so strong, because if the secular people would actually allow religion to flow properly here in Israel, then people wouldn't feel the need to have specifically a religious representation. They would go with whoever who's going to do the best job, right? But because in Israel there's such a heavily, there's a lot of, the seculars very often call it kfiyah datit, which means forced religion. But they don't realize that there's forced anti-religion, and actually the forced anti-religion is actually predated the forced religion. The forced religion, the religious parties that come and enforce their will on the secular, which they do, by the way, I'm not denying that, but they are actually a response to the secular enforcement against religion, right? By them enforcing anti-religious policies, the religious people got up and started their own political parties, and now they're forcing their religious policies on the rest of Israel. And if you ask me, I think that neither one should be done. I think that the proper way for a Jewish government to run today really is to kind of a little bit on the American basis of freedom, which means let people do what they want to do. Don't get into their way, right? And I think that that's a problem, because Israeli culture has been built a lot on well, it was built by communists, which are control freaks. Yeah, they want to control everything, etc. Now, because they built the culture based on controlling everything, well, guess what? When you build a culture based on controlling everything, and you happen to be a democratic society, you're gonna have groups that are gonna try to control you as well. You try to know them, and that's actually what's happening, unfortunately, in Israel. As again, Israel is a secular state. It has nothing to do. There's no religious value to the state of Israel. And there is, as I said, there are religious parties, and the only reason why religious parties became so big is because religious people felt that the secular parties did not have their best interest in mind, and not just not their best interest in mind, that they were even actively trying to make it more difficult to be religious. So it became a necessity. And I'll be honest with you, I'm here now for 10 years. I voted in every Israeli election since I got here, right? And I can tell you right now that I cannot vote for a non-religious party. I cannot do it. I cannot bring myself to do it, because there's never been a non-religious party that I felt would properly stick up for religious values. and I forget about. I don't care. Again, I don't care about. I don't care about them driving their bus in Tel Aviv. By the way, right? I don't care that. I don't vote for the religious party, which will try to stop public transportation in Tel Aviv. That's not why I vote for the religious party. I vote for the religious party so that the secular people don't try to force their education down my kid's throat. That's why I do it. Right? I do it because I know that having a religious lifestyle, right, would be extremely challenged if the religious parties weren't in power, right? And that's why I vote for them. I don't vote for them because I want to stop the Tel Aviv guy from driving a bus. Huh? Again, it should be. I wouldn't say again. It is secular, but I would. Yeah. Again, I think that it needs to be built on the fact that no one controls everybody, and everybody needs to live peaceful with each other. And by the way, even if from a religious perspective, I think that connection to godliness has to develop in a non what how do you say controlling a compulsive. It has to be a non-compulsive manner. Right? You have, for example, throughout history, you had people that try to force religion down people's throats. It's in some cases the religions grew very, very big, right? Christianity and Islam both pretty much got their fame because they killed people over it. But at the end of the day, do these people really believe in it? Right? Are they really connecting to God? Right? They say, oh, well, if Christianity wasn't true, how did it get so big? The answer is because you killed people, right? That's it. Right? How did Islam get so big? Because it killed people, right? If you ask Judaism, how did Judaism get so influential? Because we wrote your books. You took our books. That's why you got so. We wrote such a powerful. Not wrote. First of all, God wrote the Bible, right? But the Jewish people had such a deep, influential, and brilliant teaching that other religions felt that they needed to take our teachings in order to build successful religions, right? So Christianity, who is built on the Bible, they saw the brilliance of the Bible and they said, we need to build our religion based on the Bible. So did the Islam. So did the Muslims also, right? So how did the Jews become influential? We became influential through teaching, through enlightening. We didn't come influential through killing. Only Christianity and Islam right now, out of the two major religions, they only became big through killing. And by the way, even today, thank God Christians stopped killing. But if you look historically, they grew because they killed people. Yeah, that's it. Anyways, I don't know how we got into that, but Baruch Hashem, where are we? Are you talking about the what? What is the depravity in Tel Aviv? What is that depravity in Tel Aviv? I don't know what that's talking about. No, again, in Tel Aviv, in the whole Israel right now, it is illegal for public transportation to run. There's laws against it. And these laws were on Shabbat, on Saturday, because it's the Jewish Sabbath. And right, private companies are allowed to, but the public transportation can't. And these laws were instated by the religious parties because that's the Jewish law, and we believe that Jewish people should not do that. So that is a type of religious compulsion, religious force, right? Now, again, what's that? It is for religious reasons. What do you think?
Identity together, otherwise the whole Zionistic project will fall apart.
Not necessarily, by the way. No, because a lot of these things were pushed. A lot of these things were pushed by the religious parties. There's a lot of laws in Israel that were pushed, forced religion by the religious parties. But yeah, as I said, the forced religion is a reaction to the forced anti-religion that took place prior to that, and it takes place today. Till today, you see a lot of laws from the secular parties that seem to be trying to attack the religious community, right? And therefore, it's almost like the seculars built a need for religious communities to defend themselves through politics. That's the only way we could defend ourselves. And therefore, the religious parties have power, right? Does that mean that I like everything that religious parties do? No. Does that mean that I would never vote for a secular party? No, I would vote for a secular party if I like their ideals, plus they were not interrupting my life, I would vote for them.
Yeah. Say that the secular, they also have like the double spiel inside.
Catholics is not New Testament. All right. First of all, I like to tell people that say that they try to rag on the Catholics. All right. Okay. Not that I like Catholics any better than I like any other Christians, or worse, by the way. You know. No, it's the same. But I want to tell you that for a Christian to say that Catholics is not Christian is a very big problem because you all came from them. All Christianity pretty much came from the Catholics. Yeah, they did. They started from the Catholics, they broke off, right? Now, if you're going to tell me that the Catholic Church doesn't have validity and doesn't have authority, well, then you don't either, right? Because your authority originally started from the Catholic Church, right? And then they broke off, and that's actually what happened. There were people that said, no, you're wrong, and this and that. And there were priests that disagreed what was going on, and they broke out from there. Yet the statutes, right? There again, there's definitely are things that are done in the Catholic Church that are questionable from an idolatrous perspective, right? There definitely are, right? But to suggest to rip Christianity as a whole away from the Catholics, it doesn't make any sense because all of the books that you have on Christianity came through. No, they all came. No, I'm telling you historically, the books on Christianity that come from the original Gospels, etc. These are all coming through the Catholic Church to you. They're not. They were not. You don't have. They were edited by the people in power in the Catholic Church. Right?
Like they added eternal heaven and hell.
They added things, they subtracted things. We actually had a very interesting conversation yesterday. If you missed it, I'm not sure if you were here, but we had a very interesting conversation. We had a very interesting conversation yesterday about the fact that the Catholic Church has a history of changing its own scriptures in order to make it look better. Now, once you're telling me that you changed it, how could I trust that any of the information is true? You're telling me that your leader or your founder did X, Y, Z, and therefore I should believe in him. Who said he did it? Maybe it was just put in there, just like they changed this, they changed that, right? So once you see that somebody's changing scriptures, automatically you can't trust anything that's there because how do you know what was changed and how do you know what was not changed, right? So I can't have an honest, intellectually honest conversation with somebody about what it says in the Gospels especially if you're not Catholic, because if you're not Catholic, you're going to admit that the Catholic Church messes around with their scriptures, right? But guess what? You got the scriptures from them. How do you know they didn't mess around with it before you got it? Right? And then everything that's in there, you don't know what's true and what's not true. You don't know if any of it is true or if any of it is not true. You have no way of knowing what's true and what's not, right? But there is truth in the fact that in Catholic churches they definitely have idols, and it seems like it's serious idol worship. I've actually spoken to a particular person involved in the Catholic Church that some of the beliefs that he told me seem to be complete idol worship. Specifically, when he asked me, where does evil come from? I said, what do you mean? God created everything. And he's like, no, how could you say that God created evil? He basically said that Satan created evil. The Satan created evil and God created good. So I said, so in other words, you're telling me there's two creators. There's a creator of good and creator of evil. So how are you going to tell me that there's one God? Huh? But if first of all, no, I never created things. I manipulated God's creation, which He gave me the power to create. He gave me, again, God gave me the power to manipulate His creation, but it's His creation, right? And He gave me the power to change different things within His creation, right? It's still His creation, and He has full control over it. Okay. Again, I don't from what I understood from this guy, he feels that all evil literally were created by Satan and had nothing to do with God. If that's the truth, if that's what this guy believed, then it's definitely idol worship because he's saying that there's two gods.
No, I
A
can
God of
confirm,
good and God of evil. Here we have our friend over here is confirmed.
No, there's a whole big narrative in evangelical Christianity right now, and I'm not trying to rip on them. I have people in my family who follow this stuff, and I went to Christian school as a kid for a long time. There's a whole narrative in Christian about the spiritual warfare, about God being somehow the angels rebelled. There's certain angels that rebelled against God, and now they're in a war against God to try to dethrone God or something. And there's the creator of good and the creator of evil, and it's good versus evil, right? What they're saying is that. So what you're saying that this satanic force has some kind of power over the creator of the universe, has some kind of ability to dethrone him or gain more power, and that there's a civil war going on, and so there's this battle going on. It's that's the form of battle worship you're talking about.
Yeah, 100%. So 100%. Well said, and I think it's good that you said it because you've actually been to some of these institutions. I definitely haven't. No, I've never went to a Christian school. You're looking at me. That I ever went, that I was there physically in a church. Actually, there was one time I don't know if I actually went into the sanctuary. There was one time where I was selling something and I actually went to try to sell something to a church. Can you imagine a guy with a kippah and a beard walking into a church and it's like, I want to sell you something. I was at the time I was selling like building supplies, like the cleaning materials, garbage bags, like floor cleaning chemicals. I sold a lot of different things. I sold a lot of different things. Anyways, I think what's important is I'm not trying to God forbid, I'm not trying to God forbid insult any person's religion or belief, but I think it's important to understand the true history of what actually is and what actually isn't. It's very, very important because you cannot, if you are unwilling to research and understand the truth behind your belief, then by definition, you actually don't believe in it. You don't really believe in it, because if you really believe that it's true, you wouldn't think that anything is going to challenge it, right? Now, back to what you were saying is that God, at least the way we call it, and many people call it as well, we call God Almighty, which means we believe that He's Almighty, which means nothing could go against Him. He is He's infinitely greater than any other thing that He created. And at least according to Judaism, anybody that doesn't believe that is in fact believing in a godless reality, which means it's not real God. It's a fake God, because the real God is the God Almighty, which means that nothing could challenge Him, and everything came from Him. Everything, including evil, came from Him, and there was a purpose for having evil. I mean, you could have a whole discussion philosophically why God wanted evil. It has to do with a challenge to give us purpose, to give us something to work towards. If we could only do good, then there's no. If we could only do good, then we would be robots, because we only have one choice of what we can do. So again, there's a purpose for evil, even though we're meant to fight it and stay away from it. But there's a purpose that God created evil. He created it, and He created it for the reason, right? And at least according to Judaism, if a person doesn't believe that there's one Almighty God that everything came from and that has supreme power over everything else, to us that is idol worship according to the biblical narrative. All right. Now, there are some Christians that actually believe that belief consistent with Judaism, and some don't. It depends which Christian. Um, Although some of the other points I made also need to be dealt with.
Also,
Yeah.
interesting you said about to say that they altered the text to make it look better.
Yeah,
whatever.
yeah, the altering of the text,
Like
100%.
in other situations, like the exact opposite. Like our text, we look much better in certain
Yeah,
places.
yeah.
I guess
That's a good. Again, we have to kind of end it. We're running out of time. We're going to have to close it down shortly. But what I want to say, what you're saying is very accurate. That it's very interesting that when you look at all the religions of the world, at least the ones that I've encountered, when you speak about their founders are always perfect. They never made any mistakes. However, if you look at Judaism, every single character in the Bible made mistakes. Every single last one. I've actually went through them one by one. Every single character in the Bible made mistakes. And again, if you ask me, that would suggest, first of all, we're human. We're human. Number one is we want to recognize that we're human, and our leaders are human. Even Moses was a human being born of a mother, okay? And therefore, even Moses had the ability to make a mistake in some way, shape, or form, even though it might not be a similar mistake to the ones we make, but it is somewhat of an error from his perspective, right? And I think that it shows a little bit of the integrity of the Jewish scriptures. And by the way, hence why the whole world likes the Jewish scriptures, because the Jewish scriptures, when people read the Jewish scriptures, there's a sense of legitimacy, there's a sense of honesty and integrity. Because if you're going to paint your leaders or your founders as this perfect human being, well, very nice. Well, obviously that's why you're doing it. You want to paint, you want to say we're the best, shkoyach, right? Whereas if you want to tell the truth, you're usually going to find problems. And the truth is, usually human beings are not necessarily as good. Anyways, I think we're going to end with that because we're already running late. And I want to thank you all for joining and remind you that we do this every day at 11 a.m., sometimes at 11:15 a.m. Israel time, which depending on where you are in the world, I think we're like the GMC -3. Yeah, what's that? That whatever that official time. Yeah, whatever it is. And we thank you for coming. We love you. We hope to see you again. Please come again. Have a great day. Sei gesund. Bye bye.